to talk about minimalism and how it became so popular, and then seemingly it feels like gradually over the last 2 years or 3 years, minimalism has just sort of gone away and it's been replaced by what it was currently replaced by already, which is overconsumption. I have a bunch of unfortunate stats, figures, and stuff, but I want to talk about this stuff because I think it's so interesting and because you can learn so much from other people's failings. That's what you need to do. So this podcast, I'll talk about the things that I messed up on in my past, but also we got to look at what other people are and other mistakes that people are making. So the use of credit cards and credit card debt has been quickly on the rise over the past 25 years, peaking at over $1 trillion on nationwide credit card debt for the first time in history of the country. But why? Like, why do I think this is happening? Why is this happening? So you can see the chart here. It's, if you're just listening, back in 1999, it was at $500 billion of credit card debt, and it's slowly been rising. During the 2008 stock market crash, it actually went down, which is so interesting to me because I think that there's a certain level of the less money you have available to you, the less you're willing to use a credit card, which is why I think I'm right with my theory about everything. But it almost peaks at $900 billion right in 2008. And then it drops steadily for a very long period of time until about 2012, 2013, where it sort of bottoms out at about $675 billion. And then it basically just rises again until you can see basically 2020, the first quarter of 2020, when it was starting to peak at $900 billion. And then it dropped very quickly down to under $800 billion during the COVID lockdowns when we're all forced inside of our homes. And now it's shot really dramatically back up, unlike we've ever seen in any 10-year period, 2-year period since 1999, and now it's up over $1.1 trillion of credit card debt. It's just a remarkable graph. It's a remarkable thing to look at because it's $1 trillion of credit card debt. We're like a government with all this credit card debt. So why do I think this is happening? I think the biggest thing is that it's never been easier. In the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, getting a credit card has never been easier. Every single company seemingly has a credit card. Dick's Sporting Goods has a credit card. Best Buy has a credit card. Apple has a credit card. Every company has a credit card. Everybody's a bank now, basically, is what it seems like, or everybody's trying to sell you a credit card. So many of those store credit cards as well. You would be shocked at the interest rates. They're at the legal limit. I believe it's 26.99% APR is the legal federal law on how high you could charge interest rate. Every single store credit card is at that legal limit. I used to work at Golf Galaxy years and years ago, and they were under the Dick's Sporting Goods. So we were forced to push credit cards. I never did, and I always told people don't do it. I told them how high the APR was. I was a terrible salesman, but I knew a lot about golf, so that was good. But I always tell them, like, yeah, it's an option, and you don't have to pay today. Like, you technically, there's no interest for like 2 months or 3 months or something, but then the interest is like 26.99%, and that's a legal limit. So they're really punishing you. So I would explain this to people, and I had to be careful because if my manager heard me say that, I probably would have gotten fired. But so I mean, I don't know, like that I just felt so slimy about that. But they're so readily available, so readily accessible, and people have gone so stupid. I think that they're just dumb. Why are we putting all this money in credit cards? We know credit cards are bad. We know that 27% APR, that's a bad thing, because if you could get 20%, 27% like return on any investment that you ever invested, you would be the greatest investor to ever walk the planet. So why would you take it the other way? You would be the dumbest spender of money that to ever exist on the planet. Next is, I believe people are so materialist now. I've talked about this ad nauseum on this podcast, and I will continue to talk about this. People have become very materialistic. We are just bodies now. We are not souls and bodies. We are just we're just atoms floating through space. Obviously, as a Christian, I wholeheartedly disagree with that, but we're just atoms floating through space. So this materialist worldview where we just look at things as the end-all be-all, the ultimate good, the ultimate high, the highest thing we're reaching towards is the nicest car, the nicest house, the nicest computer, the nicest monitor, whatever it is, that's what we're trying to reach for. And I've been talking about this kind of concept for years. Just recently, I've sort of been able to put it into words, and it's a materialist culture. That's what we live in. That's how we operate. We treat things much better than we treat people. And I think that that's why the credit cards have gotten our credit card spending has gotten so out of control because we are so willing to buy these things instead of just spending time with people. You know how much it costs to just get a couple friends together and hang out? Literally just the gas it takes you to get to that person's apartment, house, condo, whatever it is. That's all it costs. And you can just play like video games, or you play a board game, that's free. My wife and I, we have friends over, we play a board game. It's so much fun. You know, we don't have to spend money on this or this or this. We might make some food, but it's like, I'm going to make food anyway. So I just make it for a couple extra people. They bring food over. And I think that, you know, we focused so much on stuff and things and experiences and this and this and this. And it's like credit card. I think a lot of this is we were locked in our homes in 2020. So the credit card spending has gotten out of control and exploded because we weren't spending money, we weren't doing anything. I think experiences, there is a value there, but we have to be very careful with how much money we're spending on this stuff because, like, at the end of the day, I want people to be able to live in the moment to a point, but you're living for tomorrow as well. If you only lived for today, you would only ever eat the most unhealthy thing that you could possibly get. That's what you would eat. But you sort of expect to be here tomorrow. So living every day like it's your last day is a flawed way to view the world and a flawed way to live because it isn't your last day tomorrow, probably. Because if you were to literally live like it's your last day on earth, you would do things so much differently than you actually live now. That's the thing. People say, oh, I'm going to live like it's my last day on earth. Yet they like barely talk to their parents. They don't kiss their loved ones. They don't hang out with their loved ones. They spend all their time scrolling on Twitter and scrolling on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and everything. And they go, oh, I'm living like it's, you know, my last day on earth, blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, you're not. You're just not doing that. So you argue with me saying, well, you should live for tomorrow and save money for tomorrow. Think about your future and you go, well, I want to be able to live in the moment. Let me rip through TikTok for 5 hours because that's what I would do on my very last day on earth. So I think that stuff is just pathetic. It's the way people view the world is just wrong. It's a materialist worldview and we need to get away from that. Basically, like this started back when I think basically once the apple fell on Newton's head, when science once science became separated from, it's weird. It's like it became separated from the church. And I think that might not have been the worst thing because we need to be able to figure out the way things work outside of God. But obviously, being a Christian, I believe things were designed by God. So it's like it'll come back to God. In my opinion, science will always point back to God. And that's what I believe. And that's sort of what I've seen has happened. But it's like once the apple fell on Newton's head, we sort of have been becoming more and more materialist as the days go by. So this is more than a credit card problem. This is a much deeper societal rot issue, but it's not going to be solved by some idiot with no hair on a podcast. The next thing is also inflation. Everything's so expensive now. I saw like with the presidential debates were this last week, and that's the thing that Trump was hitting Biden on the hardest was the border and inflation. It was crazy. And, you know, as just a normal dude that makes a normal amount of money that lives in a pretty normal area, groceries are so expensive now. Like they tell us inflation is like 10, 15, 20%. Dude, it's not. It's like groceries, I swear we spend twice as much as we used to. I can't say for sure. I can't back it up with any stats or figures. I just know that milk used to be like $2 a gallon and now it's like $5. So, and eggs used to be like $1 or $2 a dozen, and now they're like $5. So what happened? What happened to all this I don't know. They tell us inflation is this, and I don't think it's this. I think it's like way more than whatever they're telling us that it is. So I think inflation has a lot to do with this. People are just having a tougher time maybe adjusting to this because the inflation has been so rampant and so rapid over the last just few years that their lifestyle hasn't really been able to adjust because they live their lives normally, but that just got so expensive to live their lives the way that they were living their lives that they need to now take a step back and just reassess. The next thing is, I think people are just unwilling to sacrifice. We live in a culture of now. I think a perfect example is Amazon. We live in a culture of Amazon, 2-day delivery, next day delivery, same day delivery. That's the culture we live in. We live in an era of now. If I can buy this thing today, brand new, I could buy this MacBook Pro I could buy like this MacBook Pro that I have right in front of me. I could buy this for I could buy it used for $1,000 on Facebook Marketplace, but it's going to take me maybe a week to find somebody, and then I have to actually have the cash for it. I can't just borrow the money for it. Then, that's a little bit more work. You have to go meet the guy, whatever. But if I just go to Apple.com or I go to Apple Store and they give me a credit card that I sign up for, and then I get a new laptop, then I could spend $2,700, get a slightly newer one, maybe a little bit better. And I think that's how people view the world. They want the nicest thing now, which can be a good thing in some ways. Like it's pushed us in certain ways, but for like the average Joe, like we need to just, we need to be saving our money wherever we can. Buy used, buy cheap, buy secondhand. That's like the best way to save money and stop buying with credit cards. That's, I think, one of the best ways to not use credit cards, especially to not buy like clothes and all this stupid crap that you have. Like you have too many clothes, dude. Like you throw out some of your clothes. One of the best ways to not buy all that stuff is to buy it with cash or buy used and buy it locally. This laptop, I've talked about it before, but I bought it for $1,200 almost a year ago to the day. And it's a 2021 MacBook Pro. Like, it's a great laptop. And, you know, I could have bought the newest one and ordered it and had $3,000, whatever it is. But, like, why? I could just find one on Facebook Marketplace, meet them within a couple days. I have the cash. I could buy it. So it's a different way to view the world. And it's a better way to view the world, because you're buying things you don't need to impress people that, you know, don't really even like you, that you don't even like. So you're just trying to impress them. Next, I know a lot of people claim points. I don't like that. I disagree. I just think that people use that as an excuse to spend more money than they have or than they normally would, because it's okay, because I'm getting 3%, 2%, 1% cash back. I think that if you are so diligent and you are just the type of person who will never spend another extra penny on it, that's fine. Like, if you're going to use a debit card, I'm just going to use a credit card instead. I think that's fine. But you got to be on it. You got to be on it like you wouldn't believe. Like, you got to be on, what's that phrase? On it like white on rice. You got to be on it like, if you mess up once, you got to stop doing it, because I think it can get really quickly out of hand. And yeah, it is kind of nice. The cash back can be nice, but I think a lot of people will spend a little extra money because they don't have to pay it off right away, and they don't technically have the cash. So they'll pay it off next month or the month after or whatever. They'll just eat the fee kind of. So be careful about that. And I think finally, the last thing is that a lot of these are buy now, pay later, BNPL. I've talked about this on the podcast a lot about Affirm and how much I hate it and all those websites. And I think a lot of these credit cards, they give you 12 months, 0% interest financing. So you think, well, I have 12 months to pay it off. I might as well spend blah, 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 blah. I think what happens there is you spend more money than you normally would. Especially if you buy it new. Like, if it's something that you could have just bought used, like a refrigerator or a washer dryer, like that type of stuff that we've purchased used. If you're not gonna buy it, if you're gonna buy it new, you're spending more money than you would used. So you're already spending more money than you normally would have, which brings me back to my last point. Is like, you're spending more money. You think you're using it just for the points, but really you're actually just spending more money, so it sort of makes itself up. So if you're getting the 0% interest financing, I think a lot of people will just spend more money than they normally would have, because, well, I have 12 months to pay it off. But I also just think that, like, when you have the 12 months to pay it off, you can't conceptualize what it's going to be like in 12 months. Like, why don't you have the money now? How come over the last 12 months you didn't save the money to get to this point? And it's like, oh, well, I have 12 months to figure it out. Well, okay, yeah, but like, you have to figure it out. Like, you have to have it figured out. So be very careful with these buy now, pay later schemes. I have a chart here, which I thought was pretty interesting, kind of sad, something that just really bugs the crap out of me, this type of stuff. Basically, this is a chart I pulled from the Federal Reserve, and it's talking about the buy now, pay later effect. And what you can see here is that it affects women much more than it affects men. The further right the things are, the more it affects that person. The more people it affects, I should say, the higher percentage. It also seems to affect basically whatever your age is. It seems to affect you pretty evenly. A lot of people under 40 and a lot of people over 60 will use it, which I think is interesting. Education, if you are high school educated with a high school degree, it'll affect you the most. Some college will affect you a little bit less, and then if you have a full college degree, it'll affect you the least, which I think is funny, because people who go to college are stupid enough to pull like $100,000 in loans. I think a lot of that is just, I literally can't do these buy now, pay later, because if I do, I'm going to lose everything because I'm paying for college still. And then you can see who it affects the most. Under $30,000 of household income, 30 to 50, 50 to 75, that's who it affects the most. 75 to 150 and 150 and above, those people are just stupid. If you are in that bracket and you are using buy now, pay later or credit cards for anything other than diligently getting the points, you're an idiot. The home ownership was relatively interesting. People who own homes versus rent homes, there's a bigger gap if you're renting. I think that's probably, I'm assuming they're probably making a little bit less money. But then they buy now, pay later, and then they spend more than they normally would have. So they're like repeating this cycle. And then below 620 credit score, of course, and people who got rejected, and people who were 30 plus day delinquency in the past year. This affects the downtrodden, the people who are doing the worst financially in our society, and it's a cycle, a never-ending cycle. If you take everything that you hear in this podcast episode, buying more stuff than you need, unwilling to sacrifice to just buy something cheaper or not buy it at all, just getting the 0% interest rate and then spending more than you normally would have been able to because you can't afford it now, even with cash. it's a cycle, because then you're going to have to afford it. So then the next time you have to buy something big, you have just finished paying off the last thing. So you're going to do the same cycle over and over and over and over and over and over again. And it's going to keep you in the cycle of poverty that is so frustrating, because it's just these companies are taking advantage of you. So stop letting them take advantage of you. Like, this stuff bugs the crap out of me. I will say this till the cows come home. Please, just think really hard about your purchases. Be more aggressive and be more diligent with what you're buying. Just sacrifice a little bit more. And I promise you, as you start to make more money, as you start to grow in your career, as you start to sacrifice more, you will realize that all that stuff means nothing. And it's just about the people that you spend it with, like the time that you spend it with. Like, you could take away everything from me. All my house, my cars, my $3,000-$4,000 minivan that I really love, my laptop, my camera, whatever. You could take everything from me. But as long as I have my kids and my wife, I'm fine. Like, I'll be good. I'll be okay.